The summer of 1916 was a furnace of death on the Western Front. The Battle of the Somme, one of the bloodiest chapters in World War I, had turned the fields of northern France into a churned wasteland of mud, wire, and bodies. Private William Carter, a 19-year-old farmhand from Yorkshire, England, was no hero, at least not in his own eyes. He was just a boy who'd signed up with dreams of glory, only to find himself knee-deep in the slime of a British trench, clutching a rifle that felt heavier with every passing day. This is his story, a true war story of survival against impossible odds, a tale that would later be whispered as the Trench Miracle. William's world was a narrow slit of earth, the trench walls slick with rain and rot. The air stank of damp wool, gunpowder, and something worse, decay. For weeks, the Somme had been a relentless grind. Artillery shells screamed overhead, shaking the ground until it felt like the earth itself was bleeding. Men fell daily, some to bullets, others to the mud that swallowed them whole. William had seen his best mate Tommy vanish in a blast just days before, leaving nothing but a torn cap and a scream that still echoed in his nightmares. Fear was a constant companion, gnawing at his insides, whispering that he'd never see home again. Every whistle of a shell made his heart lurch. Every distant crack of a sniper's rifle sent him ducking. Yet, amidst the terror, a stubborn spark of hope flickered in him, a belief that somehow he'd make it through. On July 14th, 1916, the orders came. William's platoon was to join a dawn assault on a German strongpoint, a network of trenches and machine gun nests known as Death's Hollow. The name alone sent shivers through the men. Rumors swirled of soldiers who'd gone over the top and never returned, their bodies lost in the cratered hell of no man's land. As night fell, William sat in the trench, his breath shallow, his hands trembling as he cleaned his rifle. The sky was a bruise, heavy with the promise of rain. He tried to picture his mother's face, the rolling hills of Yorkshire, anything to anchor him against the dread that threatened to swallow him. The sergeant's voice cut through the dark. "Fix bayonets. Be ready at first light." William's stomach twisted, but he obeyed, the cold steel of the bayonet glinting like a promise of what was to come. At dawn, the whistle blew, a piercing shriek that unleashed chaos. William scrambled over the parapet, his boots slipping in the mud, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. The air erupted with the chatter of machine guns and the roar of shells. Men fell around him, some screaming, others silent, their bodies crumpling like rag dolls. No man's land was a nightmare landscape of barbed wire and craters, each step a gamble with death. William ran, half blind, driven by instinct and terror. A shell exploded nearby, the shock wave slamming him to the ground. Dirt rained down, clogging his mouth, his eyes. He gasped, certain he was dead, but his hands clawed at the earth, and somehow he was still alive. Then came the moment that would haunt him forever. Another shell hit, closer this time, and the world turned black. William felt himself falling, tumbling into a crater as the ground gave way beneath him. He landed hard, pain shooting through his leg, his rifle lost in the chaos. The crater was deep, its walls slick with mud, the air thick with the metallic tang of blood. Above, the battle raged on, but down here, it was silent, too silent. William's breath came in ragged gasps, as he realized he was alone, trapped in a pit that felt like a grave. His leg throbbed, and when he touched it, his hand came away wet with blood. A shard of shrapnel had torn through his thigh, not deep enough to kill him outright, but enough to make every movement agony. Panic clawed at him. He shouted for help, his voice hoarse. But the only answer was the distant thunder of artillery. The crater's walls were too steep, too slippery to climb. He was stuck, a sitting target if the Germans advanced or if another shell found him. The thought of dying here, alone, buried in the muck, was worse than any bullet. William's mind raced, conjuring images of his body lost forever, his family never knowing what became of him. Yet, even as fear threatened to break him, that stubborn spark of hope refused to die. He tore a strip from his uniform, wrapping it tightly around his wound, wincing as the pain flared. He had to survive. He had to find a way out. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time blurred in the crater. The sky darkened, rain falling in sheets, turning the pit into a freezing slurry. William's strength ebbed, his body shivering uncontrollably. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, and thirst burned his throat. He licked rainwater from his hands, each drop a lifeline. At night, the sounds of war grew quieter, replaced by eerie moans from no man's land, wounded men crying out for help that wouldn't come. William's heart ached, but he was powerless, trapped in his own fight for survival. Once, he thought he saw movement at the crater's edge. A shadow that might have been a German patrol. He froze, pressing himself against the mud, his breath held until his lungs burned. The shadow passed, but the fear lingered, a weight heavier than the mud. Despair began to creep in, whispering that this was the end. William's thoughts turned to his mother, her gentle voice, the way she'd hum while baking bread. He imagined her waiting for a letter that would never come. The image was unbearable, and it stirred something in him. A defiance, a refusal to let the war claim him. He started digging, using his hands to scoop at the crater's walls, ignoring the pain in his leg, the cold that numbed his fingers. The mud fought back, sliding down in clumps, but William kept at it, driven by a primal need to live. His nails tore, his hands bled, but inch by inch, he carved a foothold, then another. It was slow, agonizing work, each movement a battle against his own body and the unforgiving earth. Then, a miracle, or as close to one as the Somme could offer. On what he later learned was his third day in the crater, William heard voices. British voices. A patrol, searching for survivors after a failed push. He tried to shout, but his voice was a croak, barely audible over the wind. Desperate, he grabbed a rock and banged it against his canteen, the clanging echoing in the pit. The voices stopped, then grew closer. "Down here," William rasped, tears streaming down his face. A face appeared at the crater's edge, a young corporal, eyes wide with disbelief. "Blimey, he's alive!" the corporal shouted. Ropes were lowered, hands reached down, and William was pulled from the pit, his body limp, but his heart still beating. The men carried him back to the British lines, through the mud and wire, past the bodies of those who hadn't been so lucky. Medics patched his leg, marveling that he'd survived the blood loss. The the cold, the starvation. William's war wasn't over. He'd spend months in a field hospital, then return to the front before the armistice in 1918. But the crater stayed with him, a scar deeper than the one on his thigh. He told the story sparingly, not out of pride, but because words could never capture the terror, the hope, the sheer will it took to claw his way out. To his mates, it was the trench miracle, a tale passed around campfires, a flicker of light in the Somme's endless darkness. William Carter lived to see peace. Returning to Yorkshire, where he married, raised a family, and died in 1969, an old man surrounded by love. His survival was no grand act of heroism, no charge into enemy lines. It was something quieter, yet no less profound. A boy's refusal to let the war bury him. The Battle of the Somme claimed over 1 million lives, but William wasn't one of them. His story, pieced together from letters, diaries, and whispers among veterans, stands as a testament to the human spirit's unbreakable resolve. On the killing fields of France, where death seemed certain, one soldier found a way to live. What does William's story mean to you? The Somme was a graveyard, but it was also a stage for miracles, small, stubborn acts of survival that echo through history. Share your thoughts in the comments and tell us which true war story you want to hear next. Subscribe to True War Story for more authentic war narratives that bring the past to life. Stories of fear, hope, and the will to endure.